Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Prabhupada 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 Srila Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Jai. So welcome everyone to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are going to be starting a new chapter today. Chapter 11 of the 5th canto. This is called Jad Bharat Instructs King Rahugana. So you've been hearing about Jad Bharat, how he ended up being engaged by King Rahugana to carry his palanquin, and how, because Jad Bharat was not wanting to step on any ants or insects on the ground, and he was carrying it unsteadily, and King Rahugana became perturbed that his ride was not very smooth. Anyway, so now Jad Bharat, who is pretending to be dumb and dull and illiterate and basically almost like a two-legged animal for most of his life, now he's finally revealing himself to be a fully enlightened, exalted human being and a pure devotee of the Lord, because he was Bharat Maharaj in a previous life. He was at the level of Bhava Bhakti. So he has full knowledge, and even from that point, he was learning. Even the body of a deer, he continued learning. He was edifying himself and rectifying the consciousness that led him to take that birth as a deer. So now as Jad Bharat, he's attaining the perfection, spiritual perfection, and he's going to share a little bit of spiritual truth with King Rahugana for his enlightenment. So, all right, the verse that we're going to focus on today is text 5. So let's just read the translations through to text 11, and then we'll go back to 5. So who's got the mic there?
Text 1. The Brahmana Jad Bharat said, "My dear king, although you are not at all experienced, you are trying to speak like a very experienced man. Consequently, you cannot be considered an experienced person. An experienced person does not speak the way you are speaking about the relationship between a master and a servant, or about material pains and pleasures. These are simply external activities. Any advanced, experienced man, considering the absolute truth, does not talk in this way."
Boom. So the first thing he does is chastise Maharaj Rahugana. Can you imagine the king being told off, being told he's a fool, that he's an inexperienced, immature person by a palanquin carrier? Right? Okay. Go ahead.
My dear king talks of the relationships between the master and the servant, the king and the subject, and so forth are simply talks about material activities. People interested in material activities which are expounded in the Vedas are intent on performing material sacrifices and placing faith in the material activities, in their material activities. For such people, spiritual advancement is definitely not manifest.
Dustin.
A dream becomes automatically known to a person as false and immaterial, and similarly one eventually realizes that material happiness in this life or the next, on this planet or a higher planet, is insignificant. When one realizes this, the Vedas, although an excellent source, are insufficient to bring about direct knowledge of the truth.
So let me just interject here. So this is interesting because Jad Bharat, as I was just saying, was Bharat Maharaj. He was a king in his previous life. So he knows exactly what it's like to be a king in the material world, what the pitfalls are, what the trappings are. And so he's speaking to this king from, complete experience and personal realization. And he's telling him that all the things that you're involved in, entangled in your kingly duties, performing these rituals and sacrifices, for prosperity and for the material benefit of yourself and for the citizens, they're all basically useless, because even if you become very pious, even if you become very wealthy and opulent, even if you are very powerful, even if at the end of this life you go to a higher planet, it's all insignificant. And this sort of Vedic knowledge is not enough. It's insufficient to bring you to actual truth. Okay. Next verse, text 4.
As long as the mind of the living entity is contaminated by the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, his mind is exactly like an independent, uncontrolled elephant. It simply expands its jurisdiction of pious and impious activities by using the senses. The result is that the living entity remains in the material world to enjoy and suffer pleasures and pains due to material activity.
Right, so now he's going to launch into a whole thing about the mind, describing the mind, functions of the mind, how the mind carries us to the next body. And he knows this very well because he observed the functions of his own mind and how his mind got attracted to that deer and how the mind carried him into a deer's body. So he's warning King Rahugana, just don't go there. Don't follow your materialistic mind. This thing needs to be controlled. Yes, Kaylee?
Text 5. Because the mind is absorbed in desires for pious and impious activities, it is naturally subjected to the transformations of lust and anger. In this way, it becomes attracted to material sense enjoyment. In other words, the mind is conducted by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. There are 11 senses and 5 material elements, and out of these 16 items, the mind is the chief. Therefore, the mind brings about birth in different types of bodies among demigods, human beings, animals, and birds. When the mind is situated in a higher or lower position, it accepts a higher or lower material body.
Materialistic mind covering the living entity's soul carries it to different species of life. This is called continued material existence. Due to the mind, the living entity suffers or enjoys material distress and happiness. Being thus illusioned, the mind further creates pious and impious activities in their karma, and thus the soul becomes conditioned.
The mind makes the living entity within this material world wander through different species of life, and thus the living entity experiences mundane affairs in different forms as a human being, demigod, fat person, skinny person, and so forth. Learned scholars say that bodily appearance, bondage, and liberation are caused by the mind.
When the living entity's mind becomes absorbed in sense gratification of the material world, it brings about his conditioned life and suffering with the material situation. However, when the mind becomes unattached to material enjoyment, becomes the cause of liberation. When the flame in the lamp burns the wick improperly, the lamp is blackened. But when the lamp is filled with ghee and it is burning properly, there is bright illumination. Similarly, when the mind is absorbed in material sense gratification, it causes suffering, and when detached from material sense gratification, it brings about the original brightness of Krishna consciousness.
There are 5 working senses and 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. There is also the false ego. In this way, there are 11 items for the mind's function. O hero, the subject of the senses, such as sound and touch, the organic activities such as evacuation, and the different types of bodies, society, friendship, and personality are considered by learned scholars the field of activity for the functions of the mind.
Sound, touch, form, taste, and smell are the objects of 5 knowledge acquiring senses. Speech, touch, movement, evacuation, and sexual intercourse are the objects of working senses. Besides this, there is another conception by which one thinks, this is my body, this is my society, this is my family, this is my nation, and so forth. This 11th function of the mind is called false ego. According to some philosophers, this is the 12th function, and its field of activity is the body.
Last one.
The physical elements, nature, the original cause, culture, destiny, and the time element are all material causes. Agitated by these material causes, the 11 functions transform into hundreds of functions, and then into thousands, and then into millions. But all these transformations do not take place automatically by mutual combination. Rather, they are under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Jai, thank you. So let's go back to text 5 now. Text 5. Got it? Savasanatma vishayo parakto guna pravaho vikrita shodashatma bibrat pritanama birupa bedham antar bahistvam chapuraistanoti Savasanatma vishayo parakto guna pravaho vikrita sodashatma bibrat pritanama birupa bedam antar bahistvam chapuraistanoti. Please chat. Savasanatma vishayo parakto guna pravaho vikrita shodashatma bibrat pritanama birupa bhedam Antarbahishvam chapuraistanoti. Savasanatma vishayo parakto. Guna pravaho vikrita shodashatma. Bibrat pritannama bhirupa bhedam. Antar bihashtvam chabhuraistanoti. Savasanatma vishayo parakto. Guna pravaho vikrita shodashatma. Let's go ahead and do the word for word all together. Saha, that. Vasana, endowed with many desires. Atma, the mind. Vishaya aparakta, attached to material happiness, sense gratification. Guna pravaha, driven by the force of either sattva gun, rajagun, or tamagun. Vikritaha, transformed by lust and so on. Shodasha Atma, the chief of the 16 material elements, the 5 gross elements, the 10 senses, and the mind. Bibrat, wandering. Pritak Namabhi, with separate names. Rupa Bhedam, assuming different forms. Antabahishvam, the quality of being first class or last class. Cha, and. Purai, with different bodily forms. Tanoti, manifests. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Because the mind is absorbed in desires for pious and impious activities, it is naturally subjected to the transformations of lust and anger. In this way, it becomes attracted to material sense enjoyment. In other words, the mind is conducted by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. There are 11 senses and 5 material elements, and out of these 16 items, the mind is the chief. Therefore, the mind brings about birth in different types of bodies among demigods, human beings, animals, and birds. When the mind is situated in a higher or lower position, it accepts a higher or lower material body. Purport. Transmigration among the 8,400,000 species is due to the minds being polluted by certain material qualities. Due to the mind, the soul is subjected to pious and impious activities. The continuation of material existence is like the waves of material nature. In this regard, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Mayar vashe yache beshe kachaha budububai. My dear brother, the spirit soul is completely under the control of Maya, and you are being carried away by its waves. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the 3 modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. Bhagavad Gita 3:27. Material existence means being fully controlled by material nature. The mind is the center for accepting the dictations of material nature. In this way, the living entity is carried away in different types of bodies continuously, millennium after millennium. Krishna buli se jiva anadi bahir mukha ataiva mayatare deha samsara dukkha. Due to the living entity's forgetfulness of Krishna, one is bound by the laws of material nature. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militandena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, this is speaking about the mind, the functions of the mind, and Prabhupada says here in the purport, the mind is the center for accepting the dictations of material nature. So this is one of the main functions of the mind, is accepting and rejecting. So as we go throughout the world, go throughout our days, moving about in the world, we encounter so many different situations, sights and sounds and things to taste and things to touch and things to hear and all that. And we see something, and then the mind immediately decides, oh yeah, I want that. Right? We go to the prasadam time. There's all the different preparations there. The mind sees something. Oh, I want that. I don't want that. I want that. I like this. I don't like this. So accepting or rejecting. Or I want some, but they tried to give you more. No, I don't want more. The mind is like, so the mind, that's the function of the mind. Is the senses are seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, hearing. And then based on those things, the mind decides, okay, is this something that I want to accept or something that I want to reject? So those are the two main functions of the mind. And the mind also is the center for thinking, feeling, and willing. Right? So it's actually on the basis of those functions that we accept or reject. Right? So first we think, oh, is that good for me? Is that made of natural ingredients? Is that, favorable for me in some way? And or how do I feel about that? How does this thing make me feel? Does it make me feel happy? Does it make me feel inspired? Or does it make me feel disgusted or discouraged? On the basis of how we feel, we'll accept or reject. And then the willing is, having accepted it, then my will is what I decide to do. So I accept it, I'm going to take it, I'm going to eat it, I'm going to use it, I'm going to interact with this thing or not. So those are the functions of the mind. So here in these verses, Jad Bharat is giving us a little more detail about the fields of activities that the mind functions in. So he some of the things that he mentions are the senses, right? So they're the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. So the mind functions in the things that we perceive, the things that we know. So when we see something, then that vision, that sight, creates a field in which the mind will function in some way, right? The mind will react to that thing that we see. We hear some sound, or we hear some music, or we hear somebody speaking, and then the mind is going to react to that sound, so that the sound becomes a field in which the mind is going to act or react like that. That's what he's talking about. So based on our perceptions through the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the mind will act or react. And also there are the working senses, the things that we do, our activities in the world, and the way that we use our bodies to interact with those things. So the mind also reacts to the things that we do, right? So let's say I do something, and then I'm going to have thoughts about what I just did. I'm going to have feelings about what I just did. I'm going to think, oh, should I keep doing this or should I stop doing this? Is it producing the desired result or not? So the mind is always engaged in that way at every moment. And then another thing he mentions is our social interactions in society. So when we interact with other people, then okay, was that a tasteful interaction or was it distasteful? Was it an interaction that I want to invest more energy into, or do I want to distance myself? So that's the mind's function. Or maybe the way that I interacted with the person, I felt my mind told me was later inappropriate. So my mind will reject my own behavior. Don't do that again, right? So mind tells us these things. So our mind is actually very helpful because it makes us reflect on our activities. It makes us think deeply about our situation here in the material world. So it's very useful. And then Jad Bharat goes on to explain how the mind reacts depending on various factors. He mentions culture. So depending on the culture that we grew up in, our upbringing, will react a certain way. So people who grow up in one culture, they'll react to things one way, and a person in a very different culture will react a totally different way to the same thing. So it depends on culture. It depends on the time. You know, maybe the time of day. Depending on the time of day, we'll act differently. Or the time in history, the historical era that we live in, will cause us to act differently in a certain situation. Or if we don't have time, if we have plenty of time, we might respond to something differently than when we don't have time and we just have to rush through and, not give it our attention. And then other things like the physical elements, like the weather, right? If it's a beautiful sunny day, then we may choose to do something. But if it's cloudy and rainy and cold, then we may choose to not do something. So all these things come into play. And then, of course, there's our karma. So depending on our karma, we will be limited or facilitated in certain ways, and the mind will have its boundaries. That we may want to accept something or do something, but we don't have the karma to actually do it. So we're prevented. So there are all these variables. So the point that he's making here and towards the end of this section is that there are hundreds and millions of different transformations of the mind based on all of these variables. But then he ends in text 11 saying, but all of these are under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's actually Krishna who creates all these different situations, right? That Krishna is the master of all the time, place, and circumstances. And according to our karma, we are born in a certain body, we have a certain set of senses, a certain family, a certain culture, a certain historical era, and all of these things. So we never get the same experience twice. But the experience that we do get is specifically arranged for us by the Lord, who is our best friend. So Krishna is always trying to help us by making arrangements that are favorable for our spiritual advancement, or to, he's either rewarding our good behavior or he's punishing our bad behavior, but either way, he's always trying to help us improve because he wants us to be better, because that's good for us. So Krishna creates the situations, but how we react to it, how the mind reacts to it, is up to us. And that's largely determined by our false ego. It depends a lot on how we identify, who we think we are, basically. So if I think I'm my body, think that I am my body, I'm a temporary material being, and I just have this one life, and at the end it's over, then I'm going to interact with this world in a certain way, right? I'm going to think, oh, well, I'm this body, my body wants things, my senses are urging me in different ways, and this is who I am. So my duty in life is to satisfy my senses, because that's who I am. And if I'm not materially happy, if I'm not getting all kinds of sense gratification, then what's the point of life? Anyways, I only have this one life. When my body's dead, it's over. So if I didn't enjoy my senses, if I didn't enjoy myself, because I think that I am my senses, if I didn't enjoy myself during this life, then what was the use of it? So that basically is the consciousness that governs a materialistic person's decision-making, right? Whether it's going to make me, as my body, happy, whether it's going to give pleasure to my body, my senses. And so in that way, the mind, when it's materially conditioned, it becomes our enemy. Because by indulging in sense gratification, then we just get dragged into another body. And depending on how we engage in sense gratification, we'll get either a lower or a higher body. So if we engage in sense gratification according to Vedic injunctions, right, like according to Karma Kanda, then we may get a higher body. We may go to heavenly planets or something like that. But we still have a material body that has to die, and we still have to suffer. If we engage in sense gratification in ways that are against Vedic injunctions, basically do sinful activities for material enjoyment, then we'll get a lower body in an animal species, or a very difficult human condition, or in a hellish planet if it's really bad. So in any way, in any case, the materialistic mind causes us to be stuck in the material world. But if we identify with, instead of false ego, if we're in touch with our real ego, if we understand who we really are as eternal spirit souls and parts and parcels of Krishna and eternal servants of Krishna, then the mind is going to accept and reject situations and things and relationships based on whether they're favorable to our devotional service, whether they're favorable to our spiritual advancement. Because we know I'm not my body, so okay, this thing may be nice for my body, it may be pleasing to my senses, but if it's not good for my spiritual advancement, then I reject it. So then the mind becomes our friend because it accepts things favorable for Krishna consciousness and it rejects things that are unfavorable. So, yeah, an example is just everyday life. Let's say you go to the supermarket. So you're walking down the aisle of the supermarket, and then there are so many things there that you see that might be appealing. You know, they're packaged in a certain way that they attract the mind, they attract the senses, and they make us think, oh, that looks good, that looks interesting, I'll bet you that tastes really good. And so if I think I'm my body, then I'm going to be like, great, let me buy it. But if I know that I'm a spirit soul and it's something that's not offerable to Krishna, then I'm going to be like, well, you know, great marketing, but I'm not having that because it's not for me. You know, that's not what devotees eat. So accept, reject, like that. And as our, so the process of bhakti is to train the mind to accept and reject things, to think, feel, and will in the actual self-interest of the soul, in our real self-interest as souls. And it does that in two ways. The process of bhakti works on us in two ways. One is sort of like a bottom-up approach, and the other is a top-down approach. So this, what's on the bottom and what's on the top is according to Krishna's statement in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that he gives this hierarchy of things in this world. So he says that the lowest thing is the sense objects, just material things of the world, of this world. And then above the sense objects are the senses. Above the sense objects are the mind. Above the mind is intelligence. Above intelligence is the ego. And above the ego is the soul. And above the soul is the Lord. So this is the hierarchy. So the bottom-up approach means that we control the mind by engaging the senses with the sense objects in the service of Krishna, right? So we use our senses. We use our ears to hear sounds about Krishna, to hear Krishna Katha, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, to hear the holy name. We use our eyes to see the deity of Krishna. And so when we're hearing about Krishna, then we're going to think about Krishna. It forces the mind to come to Krishna. When we see the beautiful deities, Radhakala Chanji, then we're going to think about Krishna because we're looking at Krishna. It's hard to not think about Krishna when you're looking at him and he's so attractive. So thanks to the pujaris, he's always beautifully dressed and decorated and painted, and so that attracts our minds through the eyes. So in this way, the senses, the eyes drag the mind to Krishna. The ears drag the mind to Krishna. When we're using our arms and legs and in the service of Krishna, then while we're serving Krishna, then our senses, our working senses, also drag the mind to Krishna. So this is the bottom-up approach, that our mind is not thinking of Krishna. Our mind is 1,000,000 miles away from Krishna. But we just force our senses to do things in connection with Krishna, and that pulls the mind into alignment. And then simultaneously, we do the top-down approach. So the top-down approach is that we nourish the intelligence by studying the scriptures, by hearing transcendental knowledge. And then when the intelligence comes to understand that, yes, I'm not this body, I'm a spirit soul, then we can use our intelligence to discipline the mind. So when the mind starts accepting something that's not good for a devotee, that's not good for spiritual life, then the intelligence kicks in and says, wait a minute, no, I don't think so. And so the intelligence, we can use our intelligence to train the mind when our intelligence is aligned with Krishna consciousness. So that's why we have all the shastras And we need to study them and understand who we really are, what the absolute truth is, what we're meant to do in this world, and then we can control our minds. And so then as we apply the process of bhakti in both of these ways, then as we make spiritual advancement, we gradually start to observe a shift in our mind's activities, a shift in our mental functions, that the same mind that used to be very attracted to material things is no longer so attracted. The same mind that used to tell us to not serve Krishna, to, I'd rather sleep than do this service, or I'd rather sleep than get up, or I'd rather go out and enjoy with my friends and eat at a restaurant or whatever, than to, stay in the temple and take prasadam, or that same mind that used to drag us away from Krishna with all of its arguments and rationales, we'll observe that same mind will drag us to Krishna. Will tell us, what are you doing lying in bed here? It's already 4:45, the Mangal Aarti is going on. Don't be a lazy bum. Get up and get to the temple, right? Or the same mind will be like, what are you doing just hanging out with these materialistic people? Can't you see that they're just dragging you down and, making you unhappy? Just go and be with the devotees, go to the kirtan. There's a really good event going on this weekend. You should just go to it, be with the devotees. They're going to help you. You're going to be happy there. So like that. And I had this experience myself that I used to, in my younger years, I used to do a lot of book distribution. I used to go out every day on the street. And so in the beginning, my mind used to just really just whip me, just beat me up every day. What are you doing here? Can you see that other people are so much happier than you are? You're just wasting your life standing on the street trying to talk to people who aren't interested, who don't want to talk to you. Can't you see how many people said, just leave me alone? How many people are just ignoring you? Isn't it clear to you that nobody wants these books? Why don't you just go back to the temple and just, tell them that it was a bad day and you're not feeling well, and just, take a nap or something. So the mind would give me all these arguments day after day, every single day. It was trying to convince me to just don't distribute books. And it really tormented me. And so it was always a fight, it was always a battle against this mind. And sometimes the mind would win, and I would literally just pack up and go back to the temple. Other times I would push through and, be able to defeat my mind. And but I kept trying, even on those days when I went back with my tail between my legs, being scared off by my mind. Devotees would be like, all right, okay, so you had a bad day. Next time you're going to do better, and this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to tell your mind. So gradually, and I would really take shelter of my japa and pray to Krishna, please let me do it. I really want to do this service. Please let me not listen to that crazy demoniac mind. And then gradually, the mind became a little more gentle and a little more quiet, and I was able to do my service more steadily. And then one day, one of my big Maya things on Sankirtan was that, if my mind was really convincing me to not do book distribution, be like, it's a really cold day and people are really grumpy. Why don't you just go to the bookstore or go to the public library? So that was my thing. I would go to the public library, and I would always kind of comfort myself by going to the children's section and just reading kids' books. Because the kids' books always make you feel good. I don't know. When you're having a really bad day and you just need some kind of emotional support or something, you just go to the kids' section and read the. I'm not really advising it, but it does help. At least I read they always have a happy ending, and it's always everything's nice and everything's sweet. And it's oh, if only the world was like that. But anyways, so that's what I would do. So one day, I was on Sankirtan, and it started raining. So I had a clipboard that I would show people all about our, glorious ISKCON activities and ask them for donations and things. So it was raining, and my board was getting all wet. So I went into the bookstore because they also had stationery there, and I needed to buy one of those transparent plastic sheets to put over it. And so I went into the bookstore, and I got the plastic sheet. And on the way out, I had to pass through so many books. So then one book caught my eye, and I picked it up and I started reading it. It was actually, the book was called The Way to Know God or something like that. Anyway, so I thought, all right, let me see what their way to know God, if this is something good. So I started reading, and then I realized that it was more of an impersonalist kind of thing. But as I was reading, my mind is actually, as soon as I saw the book, my mind was like, no, just don't go there. And it's probably some just nonsense, you know. And then and I was like, no, let me see. And then I'm reading it, and the whole time my mind is just like, what are you doing? You should be out in Sankirtan. You know, you came all the way here with a trolley full of books, and the people are out there. You're not doing any books in here. People are just walking down the street. They're all going to hell. You know, you've got the books to save them, and you're just wasting your time reading the stupid Mayavadi book. Get out of here. You didn't come in here for this purpose. You came to get the sheet so you could do Sankirtan. So I observed, you know, like at that moment, I was just like, hey, wow, you changed your tune, my dear mind. Same mind that before was just like, get off the street. This is not, go to the bookstore or the library. Same one's like, get out of this bookstore and get out there. So I realized, wow, bhakti works, you know, like this process works. The mind actually became my friend, whereas it used to be my bitter enemy. Now it's become my friend. So it's a gradual process, but it does work. So I want to kind of ask you to share your own experiences of how your mind has changed since practicing bhakti. You know, any vivid experiences, even small experiences where you've observed and felt that the same mind that used to drag you into, you know, not so nice activities now actually encourages you in your spiritual life. Not yet.
I used to spend a lot of time watching Netflix limited series.
Okay.
I would get into those. And now I'll sit and I'll find one and I'll start watching it. And I don't even get like 15 minutes into the episode when I'm just going, this is just a waste of time. And then I'll go back to reading the Mahabharata or something like that. So
nice.
It's gratifying.
It's nice, right? And you actually can be peaceful. So the mind, the other thing that the mind would be eager for, right? The same thing now, the mind is just like, reject, you know. No. Good, thank you. Nandabraja?
I remember when I was trying to get up early regularly, I used to set like 4 different alarms, like 4 or 5 different alarms. And at one point I realized that I was just indulging my mind in this like idea that like, you know, you don't have to get up now, or maybe you can get a little bit more sleep. And so I remember in Krishna House, I was telling them like, I'm going to set 1 alarm. And I'm telling my mind, that's it. You know, we get up. So my first day doing it, all of a sudden I didn't show up to morning program. And so I came back and everybody was laughing at me because they knew that But my point is I stuck with it. And so I give my 1 alarm, we get up and we could do it. And for the most part, like, I win most of the time, you know. But it's just funny how we try to indulge the mind in different ways, and then we get stronger and we say, okay, you're not the boss here. You know, I need you to perform like this. And so that's a little experience I had is not letting my win. Matter of fact, I realized that when I get up in the morning, that's my first battle of the day. And if I let the mind win, my day like isn't a little bit tougher. That's for sure.
Yeah, every little time that we give in to the mind becomes stronger. And the next time that same situation arises, it's even more difficult to, you know, do the right thing or to say no to the mind. So, yeah, it's a question of training. So that's a good example of how you trained your mind. You had been letting it do its thing, and then finally you're just like, you know, mind, I'm going to start getting you into shape here. We're going to start disciplining you. So, good. And then your mind came into line, and now you're good. Nice.
I can share. like Prima said, I'm also struggling with a lot of things with my mind. But
Speaking to the mic.
so one thing that is working is like, because after a day's work, I would like to indulge in honoring a lot of heavy prasadam after, because I felt like I earned it. But that would give me a lot of belly problem. And so now that I'm replacing it with coming to the morning program, the higher taste, so then things I feel like, okay, if I just don't honor that prasadam, and it gives me so much problem, but I have the morning program because I'll be refreshed for that. So the mind is able to, abstain from honoring heavy prasadam in the evening.
Nice. Good. Yeah, and also we can kind of, because the mind wants to enjoy, right? So we can just tell the mind, all right, you're going to get your enjoyment, not this way, but another way. And so we're not going to enjoy by eating a huge meal at night. We're going to enjoy by getting up early and being fresh and bright and energetic in the morning program, and singing and dancing for Krishna and chanting good rounds and feeling really satisfied afterwards. And yeah. Mm-hmm. It's okay.
Thank you for a nice class. I have experiences of, for a while, for countless lifetimes, my mind has been impossible to control and just like tormenting me and getting me to do all sorts of things. And then I'll get some inspiration, like maybe a direct instruction from a Shiksha guru that empowers me for some time. And then my mind is like Nanda Braj's example, I'm like waking up, first ring of my alarm, 3:45, I'm there, like, no questions asked. And that lasts for a little while, but then the mind, comes back in, and I start to notice, I'm actually really tired. Maybe I'll do better if I sleep long. And then slowly, like with good ideas, supposedly, the mind just convinces me to relax my standard a little bit. And so again, I go down to a little bit of a lower standard. So how do I maintain that, instead of like, okay, yeah, the mind is my friend for a month and then back down, and then the mind's my friend again and then back down? How can I just keep it there?
Yeah, so that's the modes of material nature, right? Interacting, influencing us. So out of the mode which is for maintenance is the mode of goodness. So we really need to cultivate the mode of goodness in all aspects of life. And then when we get used to functioning in the mode of goodness, then it becomes easy to maintain things. But because we are so much influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance, then we can start something, because that's the mode of passion. We can start something, but then it kind of peters off as our passion becomes influenced by ignorance again, and then it's again into the laziness and sleep and procrastination and depression and those things. So basically we have to keep ourselves well versed on the qualities of the mode of goodness, and that's why Krishna gives so much guidance on the three modes and how their qualities and how they interact, and how we can strive for goodness in all of our activities. So the more we actually strive for goodness, then the more the mode of goodness will reciprocate with us by being with us and helping us. It will become our modus operandi of our consciousness, when we get into that pattern. But it's a fight, Krishna says that the three modes are always vying for supremacy. They compete with each other. So it just depends, it just depends on which one we are going to nourish. And every time we choose goodness, then the modes of passion and ignorance kind of step into the background. But if one time we choose ignorance or passion, then that makes the mode of goodness step into the background, and then it's hard to get it back. So we have to be very vigilant to keep ourselves in the mode of goodness. It's a work. It requires work. It requires consciousness, intention, and endeavor, like active endeavor. And Yeah, and also using our intelligence to tell the mind, okay, mind, this is what we want to accept, because it's within our power to train our minds, to calibrate our minds to accept and reject. So mind is going to accept and reject, and it's not like the mind is a living thing. The mind doesn't have a mind of its own, right? The mind is just a material element. It's just an instrument. So just like any instrument, like a scientific instrument, if you're going to use it, you have to calibrate it. So you calibrate it to do what you want it to do, to measure things the way you want it to measure. So in the same way, we need to calibrate our mind according to that, okay, mind, you're going to accept this and you're going to reject this. We need to tell it that, right, very clearly. And be firm about it. And every time it starts to accept the thing that's not what we told it to accept, then no, remember, accept this, reject this. Oh, okay. And then gradually, like what Nanda Braja was sharing, right? That your mind was used to accepting that, yeah, when the alarm clock goes off the 5th time, then we'll get up. You know, it's like, no, now it's different. Now you're not going to reject the first alarm. You're going to accept the first alarm and wake up at the first alarm. And we're going to wake up. So like that. So yeah, it's good that you have a determination. You set a resolution that, okay, I'm going to wake up at 3:45. So then you just need to keep reminding the mind that, remember, it's 3:45, right? No questions asked. And just keep telling it again and again. And remember, we're doing this. We need to maintain this. Why, my dear mind? Because maintenance is in the mode of goodness. And if I can maintain this, I can maintain other good things in my life, and I can be a good, steady devotee. Yeah.
I was appreciating your point about how passion can basically overcome some of the things that we're doing to the body that aren't good for it in a long term. So in the mode of passion, we might stay up till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock and still get up in the morning because we're pushing ourselves. We're able to do that. Or we might eat heavy, and yet in the morning we still can get up for a little bit. But over time, we kind of are doing these things against our body that aren't really in the mode of goodness. And over time, it's like, I'm just so tired. Sometimes we call this burnout, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm burnt out. Well, we just, been pounding our body and overcoming some things because of the mode of passion. And just after a while, it just goes, okay, I can't do this anymore. Anyways, I just wanted to add that because I really, when you were talking, it made it clear that the mode of passion can overcome some things for some time, but after a while it catches up to us and we just can't handle it.
Yeah, so with the mode of passion, we can get out of the mode of ignorance, right? But the mode of passion, and we'll feel good for a while, because mode of passion, that's the characteristic of happiness in the mode of passion, is that it's like nectar in the beginning but poison in the end. So we'll feel good for a while, but then because we can't maintain the mode of passion, then we'll end up feeling defeated, disappointed, frustrated in ourselves, like that. So we can use the mode of passion to get out of the mode of ignorance, but then we need to quickly bring in the mode of goodness to maintain what it is that we wanted. And then the mode of goodness will help us avoid burnout, because mode of goodness will enlighten us in how we can do things sustainably. Okay. Yes, Ajit.
Thank you very much. I have a question. So, from my experience, when I'm on point with my schedule, then I'm good. Then I can just keep doing like one devotional activity after another. But then some days something's off. Like the other day, it was in the afternoon, like after 3, and I realized I was like really tired. But I'm like, okay, it's too late to take a nap. So I was like, yeah, I gotta stay up somehow. And so I'm reading, and I literally just passed out like reading. Like I wasn't even trying to. And I wake up like, I don't know, 20 minutes later or something. And then I couldn't sleep at night. And it's like once like I finished my whole day schedule, I did all my reading, my chanting, everything. But now it's 10 o'clock and I'm like wide awake. I feel like that's when Maya's like, oh, hey. Like that's when everybody else is asleep and my consciousness is more in the mode of ignorance. And that's when the mind starts to make me want to do things that are not good, like that are just Maya. Mm. So what do I do? Like, how do I deal with that? Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you know that you need an afternoon nap, then just, like schedule it so that, you just take that afternoon nap at the time when you're supposed to, or, figure out a daily schedule that, incorporates sleep patterns that work for you, right? So that you don't end up in that situation. But if somehow you're up late at night and everyone else is sleeping and your mind's like, hey, everyone's asleep, no one's going to know anything, I can do any damn thing I want, right? Sometimes the mind is like that. So, we just have to tell the mind, no, it doesn't matter who's looking, Krishna is always seeing, Krishna is not sleeping. So, and also, what am I doing, right? Like, what am I even doing here? I'm trying to be a devotee. So, I'm not doing devotional service just to look good, right? If someone's looking, then I'll serve. If everyone's sleeping, then I can do some Maya. It's not like that. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here because I'm trying to be a devotee. So even if nobody appears to be looking, I'm still going to do devotional service. So if it's 10 o'clock at night and you can't sleep, then chant some extra rounds, do some reading, do some journaling and praying. Or if those thoughts come up, that the mind wants to get into some Maya, then you can just, reveal your mind to Krishna. Sit down and write a letter to Krishna. Dear Krishna, here I am. It's 11 o'clock at night. I can't sleep. My mind's going crazy. It wants me to do this. I know it's not good for me. I really just want to think of you and chant your holy names. Please help me. And, just like pour out your heart to Krishna in those moments. Either, in writing or verbally, pray, ask for help. That's when we need to call out for help. Those times, and Krishna will help. But just don't indulge the mind. Otherwise, it would become a thing, and then your mind will start looking forward to it. If you indulge your mind at one time, then the next day mind will be like, all right, everyone's going to sleep, and you took a good nap, so you don't have to go to sleep now. Remember what we did yesterday at 10:30 when everyone was sleeping? It's fun, right? All right, so here we go. Right, and mind will get us all revved up for whatever our Maya was. And then it'll be very difficult, and then we can become addicted to unfavorable activities.
I mean, actually, I feel like crap the next day, and I really don't want to do it. But it's like over time, then I forget how I felt like.
Yeah, and the mind is really, the mind is not your friend when it convinces you to do something that is not good for you, but you do it anyway, and then afterwards, the same mind turns around and says, "You're so stupid. Look what you did. You're such a loser. You may as well just leave the association of devotees because you're never going to make it because look at what you just did." So, the mind is a really, really evil that way. So we have to not give in to the materialistic mind because it just rakes us over the coals. It makes us do something that we shouldn't do. It makes us feel bad about doing it. And then it still encourages us to do the same thing again. So just Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is beat your mind with a broom. And then before you go to bed at night, beat your mind with shoes until you've spiritualized it, until your mind becomes your friend. Remember that it's your enemy. So what do you do with the enemy? You have to drive them away somehow, beat them up, whatever, You can't, don't trust your enemies because the enemy's going to hurt you in some way. So that's what Krishna tells us in Bhagavad Gita. And then when the mind becomes a friend, then that means the mind's controlled, and it's controlled purposefully. We can control it and use that instrument purposefully in the service of Krishna. And Krishna says when the mind is controlled, then the super soul is already reached. That means that what the super soul would want us to do, we'll be doing, because the mind is in touch with the super soul, because they're both in the heart. And and then when our mind is aligned with the will of the Lord, then everything becomes easy and sustainable and blissful. So, but it's a project, and we're working on this project. And sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail. But even when we have those failures, we should remember that, I can pick myself up again. I can just pick myself up, brush myself off, and start all over again. And bhakti is so powerful that it's going to win. Krishna is going to win. Okay, so we'll stop there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanandi.